Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy. Joining me this morning, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone.
Back to our regular Wednesdays, and it's turning cold out there. Um, so we've been talking about the codon ring of life and death. Last week we covered 3 of the keys, and this week we're going to be doing the last 3. So can you tell us what we have been discussing so far about the original 3?
Sure. Well, last week we covered the 42 and the 3 and the 27. The 42 was down in the sacral center, and it was about rising from the shadow energy of expectation all the way to celebration, where we get to laugh at life. And we do that by detaching. Okay. We do that by learning how to detach from life and let go of our expectations. With 3, which was in the root, our journey was from the chaotic experience of life, where we feel and are afraid of the powerlessness we face in the face of life, moving from that chaos all the way to innocence via the way of innovation, letting go of that fear and really tapping into the dynamic, optimism of the universe. And with gate 27, which was in the sacral center, we move from the selfishness that is engendered from fear when when it relates to survival, the survival of the fittest kind of energy, to realizing that the best way to the higher vibrations is to think of the survival of the group, and to realize that we are all connected. So it's about moving to altruism through selflessness. So those are the themes, and consider those as we move into these next ones.
So, saying moving on, let's move on to Gene Key 24. What can you tell us about that one?
Well, 24 is now we head into 3 today that are all in the individual circuitry, interestingly. And the 24 is in the neocortex. It is in the head center, the top one. It's the journey from addiction to silence via invention. So with this, what we have to recognize is that our thinking patterns are addictive. In the shadow level, the shadow of addiction keeps psychology professors, and marketing people who market products to us. It keeps them in business, because it keeps us in this place where we live in a matrix made of words. And we are addicted to those things because it keeps us, it keeps us, it locks in the fear, so to speak.
Well, it invokes the emotions. That's what they use in marketing, right? So it's quite interesting when you start looking at marketing. It's either the fear of missing out or the invoking the family vibes, like, oh, being together and having this. And if you have this product, you'll feel that, right? So that's what they do to us.
Yeah. And I mean, part of that is they are manipulating our thoughts to manipulate our emotions, is what this gene key would suggest. And when we raise our vibration, we go into the energy of invention in relationship to this 24th gene key. We begin to realize that there are gaps between all this thinking activity in our brain. And if we can find the gaps, that's where our genius enters in. That's where the inventiveness enters in. And so that's why this gene key is associated with silence at the citic level, because the gaps into our freedom lie between the thoughts. And so in meditation, we learn to pay more attention to the silence behind our thoughts. And gradually, in a sense, if we can find the gaps, as Gene Key says, then we can find our freedom, and we can find our genius, and we can find our inventiveness. And we can, in a sense, use those gaps to elevate our frequency and make quantum breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the acidic level, we have silence where thinking ceases.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a auditory silence necessarily. This is a silence free from thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what the 24 is about.
Okay, so how about number 23, the alchemy of simplicity?
On some strange level, I'm feeling that all of these things are starting to sound the same, and yet they're all distinct.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the gene key 23, we have a gate in the throat that points up towards the ajna.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is the throat. This is part of the thyroid. And this journey here in gene key 23 is the journey from complexity to simplicity, or to quintessence via simplicity. So what does that mean? You see, these are really big words we're using here.
Mm-hmm.
They're such
Exactly.
abstract words, and yet I'm finding that we can tune into them. I tune into the ones that I have. It's natural to tune in more easily to the ones that you have, perhaps, or the ones that you're familiar with from your relationships with people around you.
Mm-hmm.
But this shadow of complexity here in gene key 23, it's, at the fear level of ourselves, at the distrusting life level of our energy, thinking and language appear to be the same. They appear to be inseparable. And so we get caught up in that complexity. The more fearful we are, interestingly, the more complex our thinking is.
Mm-hmm.
I found that a really interesting point.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. People get caught up in the web, in the complexity of their minds. And it's, if you listen to people sometimes who struggle with, mental difficulties, mental disadvantages, their mind seems to be just this quagmire of complexity, all these stories.
Yeah.
Speech impediments and difficulties of all kinds can arise in the 23rd gate. And like the 24 and like the other individual circuitry, 23 is individual circuitry, there's a certain built-in deafness to the opinions of others. And so that's how, here your mind is incredibly complex, but you feel the right answer. You just know it. And there's nothing that's ever going to turn that sort of illusory knowingness that you have. So when we enter into the gift level, which is simplicity, at the gift level of vibration, everything becomes much simpler. We realize we get wise to how our mind makes things more complex than they need to be. And so precision and economy and efficiency of words and of thoughts and of the way we do things becomes more important. And then our energetic space feels more spacious because it's less cluttered with words and concepts. Because all that complexity acts as a filter for the truth. It blocks out truth.
Interesting.
So at the highest level of complexity, people who have a master of this are very simple in the way they communicate. They often say things that land with you incredibly strongly. And there's a real playfulness and sense of humor here. So that's lovely. And at the level of the city of quintessence, we come to an energy where you just tap into the natural beingness of things. You find the third way, which the Buddha talked about. The left-hand path is about seeking truth through logic. Okay? And of course, logic eventually bites itself in the butt and becomes sort of circular.
Mm-hmm.
And the right-hand path is the way of the artist or poet, who seeks to find meaning in things, and is governed by the heart. But the third way, the path of the mystic, is about not even. So the second path is the path of longing, logic, longing, and eventually wonder. Immersing oneself in surrender to the wonder of life, the mystery of life, and completely abandoning yourself to that,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that the power of God lies behind that.
Mm-hmm.
The quintessence is the innermost being of something. And this is where you become able to sense into
Mm-hmm.
the essential nature of reality, essentially nature of yourself and other people.
Well,
So
life,
you can,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
life, and this is where that kind of alchemical transformation sort of energy happens, where,
Mm-hmm.
lead turns into gold. And you
Mm-hmm.
realize that all the material of the shadow is like lead, is like
Mm-hmm.
coal.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to get rid of it. We simply need to raise it up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Embrace it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to the next one,
Mm-hmm.
20, it's in the throat. It's part of the individual circuitry. This is the gate of the now in human design. And in the Gene Keys language, this is the shadow of superficiality,
Mm-hmm.
which gives way to the gift of self-assurance and the city of presence. So at the level of the shadow, when we're governed by fear and distrust of life, really there isn't much consciousness available in our system, period.
Mm-hmm.
It's like quantity. It's like, how conscious are you? Well, this much. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's not a lot of room for real, true consciousness when you're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to avoid the fear, when we get caught up in busyness, so people with 20 are the people that are just busy, 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 busy,
Mm-hmm.
because they have little consciousness and they're caught up on the surface of life. And the surface of life, you get caught up in busyness.
Mm-hmm.
But as the fear starts to release, we enter into an energy of self assurance, where we let go of thinking as the authority for our decision making. And our life sinks down into our heart and into our dantian, especially,
Mm-hmm.
everything, higher consciousness resides in a solar plexus based consciousness.
And everybody
Um,
thinks it's the mind.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the heart is a guide, but the dantian is where there's so many nerve sort of ganglia there that, it all points to living there from the core.
Mm-hmm.
And at the highest level of presence, Richard Rudd says it shouldn't really be called, talked about as presence, but talked about as the presence. The experience of the breath of God, the word of God, the
Mm-hmm.
sense that this underlying presence links all creation.
Mm-hmm.
If white is the total of all colors, and the number 0, which represents infinity, or the blackness from which all forms arise, that energy, that sense of what lies back of it all,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
presence, that Eckhart Tolle and the power of the now,
Mm-hmm.
the presence behind everything. This is what the 20 is about.
There's this poem that I was gifted, and it kind of reminds me about what we're talking about. I'm going to share it. It's I hope
Please.
that you see how impactful and inspiring your words are when you speak from the heart. When one gets to glimpse into the intimate connection you have with the, oh, not with them, but with the divine. You open that bridge and lead the way for mankind to find their way into the heart of God. And I just, yeah,
That is
that sounds
beautiful.
like the presence. It sounds like that's what you find your way into. So, yeah, yeah, it's a great way of describing it, I think.
That was very apropos.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to maybe a bit of a wrap up in terms of, okay, what theme have we been really looking at here? This
Mm-hmm.
is called the Ring of Life and Death.
Mm-hmm.
Richard has some interesting thoughts, and I know your passion, Kris, for educating children so that they can live to their fullest potential. And he
Mm-hmm.
talks about this group of gene keys, the ring of life and death, as being particularly appropriate to the raising of children. So this is a quotation from Richard. He says, the ring of life and death can actually teach us how to create the perfect environment for children to grow into happy, healthy, and enlightened adults. For a child to grow up truly self-assured, which is that gate 20, remember,
Mm-hmm.
you need to model altruism. The fact that we all prosper when we act selflessly, when we all
Mm-hmm.
take care of each other.
Right.
So assured, you need to model altruism, 27, while remaining detached, 42, and encourage the invention, 24, and innovation of the children. And
Mm-hmm.
above all, communicate in a simple way with them,
Mm-hmm.
truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
These 5 keys can become the foundation of a complete life system for parents, and contemplation on them can lead to a profound sense of freedom for both
Mm-hmm.
children and parents.
Yeah, that sounds
What do you
beautiful.
think about that, Kris? Because
I
you've
think
thought a
that
lot
is,
about this.
well, I think it's beautiful because right from the beginning, parents are always comparing children and, encouraging that competitiveness rather
Mhm.
than the altruism and finding out that if we work together at all, we'll fall into place. And I think that there's cultures, I think it's in Africa where they have Ubuntu, right? And it's like the group, right? Um, kind of mentality.
Ubuntu means group, or
Well,
is that
no,
a tribe?
no, it's just their philosophy about coming together and
Mm.
doing everything together. Like we are one, right? So I think that basically explains it in a way that allows each child to shine and be that piece of the puzzle for humanity, right? And when they
Mm.
understand that we're a big puzzle and they're a piece of it, so we need you to complete the puzzle, right? But we need you to be who God made you to be, like,
Yeah,
authentically. And I think that expresses it well.
it's certainly it's a simple and good summary of some of the
Mhm.
things that might make a difference for us.
Yeah, exactly.
If we weren't so trapped in our minds, and it's really interesting to see how all these themes are the same. And so
Hmm.
the deeper I study this, the more it sinks in.
Hmm.
Find a way out of fear
Hmm.
and out of a sense of distrust of life.
Hmm.
And for me, maybe you have your own thoughts about this, Kris. For me, it's more like, don't try to not be afraid.
Yeah, it's about
You know,
surrender. Yeah, for
yeah,
for me, it's about what comes. Don't be so upset and caught up in it. It's about, okay, this has happened. Now there's a reason for this happening. What can I see? Where can I see going from here? Or how do I, you know, make it better? Or how, like, there's always this process that goes on not necessarily fixing it, but um, refining. So it's
yeah,
like it keeps polishing you to become more of who you're meant to be. So these obstacles are put to us so that we can overcome them in an inventive, creative way. That's, basically how I look at it.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Mhm.
that makes sense. That sense of resisting the fear so that then mm, by asking yourself, a series of questions, it sounds like you've embedded in yourself, okay,
Mhm.
how can I look at this a different way? How can I bring out, how
Mhm.
can I let room for God enter in that? How
Mhm.
can I relax so that I'm more able to find the solution that might, God has maybe wanted to implant within this situation?
Or like, what is this telling me? Like, maybe I'm not supposed to go in this direction. Maybe I'm supposed to find a new direction. And so, I
Mhm.
mean, it's like layered there. It's like actually sitting and thinking about things, right? Mm.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So, do you want to tell us what we're up to next week?
Next week, we go to what's called the Ring of Water, gates 2 and 8. So in
Ooh.
this codon ring, we only have 2 to look at.
Oh, so we can finish
Um,
it in one.
yeah,
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed the Codon Ring of Life and Death. It is a very important one. And we would suggest that you dive into it deeper for yourselves. If you need any help diving in, Hartwell's here at Clarity. You can book an appointment and come in and dive into your charts deeper. Um, God bless you too, Dragona. And we love that you join us every week, and we look forward to seeing you next week. With that, we'll say God bless. Have a beautiful day.